The deep blue waters of Cathara Prime shimmered with an unnatural glow as massive energy beams cut through the ocean from space above. Far beneath the surface, in the heart of their greatest city, Elder Velthan felt his world dying around him. His hands, webbed and pale like moonlight, trembled as he pressed them against the living communication device. The bioluminescent coral pulsed weakly under his touch, its light flickering like a dying star. Around him, the city that his ancestors had grown over thousands of years was crumbling. The beautiful spires made of living crystal were breaking apart, sending clouds of glittering dust through the water. "This is our final message," Velthan spoke, his voice carried by the organic transmitter into the darkness of space. His gill slits on the sides of his neck moved rapidly as he struggled to breathe in the debris-filled water. "The enemy has broken through our last defenses. Our people will not live to see another day." Through the transparent walls of his chamber, he could see other Cathara swimming frantically through the ruins. Families clutched their young ones close as they searched for escape routes that no longer existed. The children's large, dark eyes reflected the terror of a species that had never known violence until now. The Cathara had always been peaceful. They built instead of destroyed, healed instead of harmed. Their cities grew like gardens, shaped by their bioengineering skills over countless generations. They had no armies, no weapons of war. The concept of killing another being was so foreign to them that they had no words for it in their ancient language. But peace meant nothing to the hegemony. 3 different alien species had joined together in their hunger for conquest. The Vor came first, walking on 2 legs like giant lizards, their scales harder than steel, and their eyes cold as winter. Behind them flew the Zephyrians, looking like enormous insects with wings that could slice through metal. Finally came the Korath, beings made of living rock and metal, who felt no pain and showed no mercy. Together, they had swept across Cathara space like a terrible storm. 12 beautiful worlds had already fallen. Some populations were taken as slaves to work in the hegemony's mines and factories. Others were simply killed when they proved too different to be useful. The hegemony wanted the Cathara's worlds for their rich oceans and rare minerals, but they had no use for the Cathara themselves. Velthan closed his ancient eyes as another explosion rocked the city. When he opened them again, he could see cracks spreading across the great dome that protected their people from the crushing depths. Soon, even this last sanctuary would be gone. "We have tried to contact every civilization we know," he continued, speaking into the transmitter, though his voice was now barely a whisper. "We have begged for help from the Galactic Council. We have offered everything we have to anyone who might defend us. But no one will come. They are either afraid of the hegemony, or they simply do not care what happens to us." It was true. The great powers of the galaxy had watched the Cathara's destruction with cold calculation. Some feared that helping would bring the hegemony's anger down on them. Others saw the gentle Cathara as weak and worthless. The Galactic Council had met many times to discuss the situation, but their talks led nowhere. They spoke of laws and treaties, while entire worlds burned. "We are alone," Velthan said, and the words tasted bitter in his mouth. "We have no allies, no friends among the stars. Our only crime was living on worlds that others wanted to take." Around him, his advisors worked desperately at their own bioluminescent panels, trying to coordinate the final evacuation ships. But there were so few ships, and so many people still trapped in the dying city. Most would not escape. Most would die here, in the ruins of their beautiful home. Through the organic walls of his chamber, Velthan could see the hegemony ships hanging in the water above like dark shadows. Their hulls were black and ugly, built only for war and destruction. Even now, he could see their weapons charging for another attack, preparing to finish what they had started. "If anyone receives this message," Velthan spoke one last time, putting all his remaining strength into the words, "please remember us. Remember that we lived, that we loved, that we built beautiful things. Remember that we tried to be good neighbors to all the peoples of the galaxy, even though none would be neighbors to us in return." The transmission ended as a massive explosion shook the entire city. The Great Dome finally cracked completely, sending tons of water rushing in, but somehow, impossibly, the message had been sent. It raced through the darkness of space on invisible waves, carrying the Cathora's final plea to anyone who might be listening in the depths of space, far from the dying world of Cathora Prime. That desperate call for help was about to reach ears that belonged to a species the galaxy had dismissed as young and foolish. A species that had one quality the rest of the civilized galaxy had forgotten. They still believed that the right thing to do was to help those who could not help themselves. The message found the humans, and everything was about to change. The bridge of the HSS Indomitable hummed with quiet activity as Captain Lee Haon stared at the holographic display floating before him. The alien words had been translated into Korean, but their meaning hit him like a physical blow. Somewhere in the darkness of space, an entire species was dying, and they had sent out one last desperate call for help. Huen was a tall man with kind eyes, though right now those eyes were hard with anger. He had joined the Space Navy to explore new worlds and protect Earth, but he had never expected to hear something like this. The Kithora's message played again on the ship's speakers, and he could hear the pain in the alien elder's voice even through the translation software. "Sir," said Park Nari from her communications station. She was young and had only been on the ship for 6 months, but she was already one of the best officers Huen had ever worked with. Her fingers moved quickly across her control panel as new messages came in from Earth. "Galactic Command has sent new orders. All human ships must stay on their current patrol routes. They say we cannot get involved in alien conflicts." Huen felt his hands clench into fists. He looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. These were good people, men and women who had left their families and homes to serve among the stars. Every one of them had heard the Kithora's plea, and every one of them looked as angry as he felt. "How far are we from their location?" Heen asked. Gotkimde, the ship's navigator, was already working on his calculations. He was older than most of the crew, with gray hair and steady hands that never shook, even in the worst situations. 18 hours if we push the engines to maximum speed, Captain. "But sir, the orders from command are very clear." "I heard the orders," Huen said quietly. He thought about his sister Sue back on Earth. She was still in school, studying to become a doctor because she wanted to help people. What would she think of her big brother if she knew he had received a call for help and done nothing? What would she think if she knew he had followed orders while innocent people died? Choi Min, his executive officer, stepped forward. He was Hyen's oldest friend, and they had served together for 5 years. "Captain, I have to say this officially. If we disobey these orders, there will be serious consequences. The diplomatic problems alone could damage Earth's relationship with the other galactic powers. Some people might call what we're thinking treason." Hien looked at his friend and saw the conflict in his eyes. Min was not trying to stop him. He was just making sure Hien understood what they would be risking. "I know," Hien said. He turned to face his entire bridge crew. "But we didn't come out here to watch people die while politicians argue about rules and treaties. We came here to do what's right." He paused, looking each of his officers in the eye. "Anyone who wants to can transfer to another ship when we get back. I won't hold this decision against anyone who doesn't want to be part of it, but I've made up my mind. We're going to help them." Paknari spoke up first. "I'm with you, Captain. My grandmother always told me that when someone is drowning, you don't stop to ask their name before you pull them out of the water." Kimde nodded his gray head. "My daughter is about to graduate from the academy. I want her to serve in a navy that stands for something more than just following orders." One by one, every officer on the bridge voiced their agreement. Huen felt pride swell in his chest. These people were the best of humanity, and they were proving it right now. Send a message to all human ships in this sector, Haon ordered. Tell them about the Kithara situation and our intentions. Any ship that wants to join us should meet at the coordinates I'm sending. Across human space, the same conversation was happening on dozens of ships. Admiral Yun-jae was commanding a full battle fleet when he received the message. He was a veteran of many conflicts, and he knew that what they were about to do could end their careers. But he also knew that some things were more important than careers. Captain Song Hannah was leading a patrol group near the Outer Rim when the call came. She was the youngest captain in the human fleet, but she had already earned the respect of her crew through her courage and compassion. She didn't hesitate for even a second before ordering her ships to change course. Commander Ote was escorting mining ships in a quiet sector when he heard the Cathora's plea. He had seen what happened when good people stood by and did nothing. His own grandparents had told him stories about such times from Earth's history. He would not let it happen again on his watch. Within hours, human ships from across their territory were racing toward Kithara Prime. They came from patrol fleets and escort groups, from research stations and border outposts. Some were military vessels built for war. Others were converted civilian ships with weapons, hastily mounted on their hulls. They all knew they were probably flying toward their deaths. The hegemony forces were larger, better equipped, and more experienced in battle, but they also knew they were the only hope the Kithara had left. Humanity was going to war, not for conquest or glory, but for something much simpler and much more important. They were going to war because it was the right thing to do. The massive ships of the hegemony hung in the dark space around Kithara Prime, like giant metal birds waiting to feast on the dead. Their hulls were black and covered with weapon ports that glowed red as they charged for the final attack. Elder Velthan floated in the emergency command center, watching through the bioluminescent displays as the last evacuation ships struggled to escape from his dying world. The Vorthok dreadnoughts were the largest, looking like enormous lizards made of steel and hatred. Their reptilian commanders hissed orders as they prepared to finish what they had started. Behind them, the Zephyrian ships buzzed and clicked, their insect-like crews eager to add another world to their collection of conquests. The Korath vessels were different, silent and cold, like floating mountains of metal and stone. The final transport has launched, reported one of Velthan's assistants, her voice shaking with exhaustion and fear. But they will not make it past the blockade. The enemy ships are too fast, too powerful. Velthan closed his ancient eyes and tried to accept what was coming. His people had done everything they could. They had saved as many as possible, but it would not be enough. The children, the elders, the artists and engineers who carried the knowledge of their civilization, most would die today. Then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to rip open like torn fabric, and human ships poured through the holes in reality. They came in waves, dozens of vessels of all sizes and types. Some were sleek military cruisers, others were converted cargo ships with weapons welded to their sides. All of them bore the simple blue and white flag of Earth. The lead ship was smaller than the hegemony dreadnoughts, but it moved with purpose and confidence. As it came closer, Velthan could see scars on its hull, where armor plates had been quickly added, and weapon ports that had been cut and mounted in desperate haste during the journey here. A voice crackled through the Kithara communication systems, speaking in accented but clear galactic standard. Kithara vessels, this is Captain Lee Hyun of the Human Expeditionary Force. Continue your evacuation. We will take care of the rest. The hegemony commanders were caught completely off guard. They had been expecting to finish off a defenseless species, not face a new enemy that had appeared from nowhere. The Vorthok admiral roared orders in his harsh language, demanding to know where these humans had come from and why they dared to interfere. What happened next was unlike any space battle in the history of the galaxy. The hegemony had fought many wars, but they always followed the same patterns. Large ships formed orderly lines and traded massive volleys of fire until one side broke and retreated. It was predictable, methodical, and boring. The humans did none of these things. Their ships scattered in all directions like a pack of wild animals, using their smaller size and faster engines to dart between the huge hegemony vessels. They attacked from above and below, from the sides and even from behind, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted effectively. Captain Song Hannah commanded a group of destroyers that moved like dancers through space. She led them in a direct attack on the largest Vorthok ship, the one carrying the enemy admiral. Her ships were tiny compared to the massive dreadnought, but they swarmed around it like angry bees, their weapons cutting through its shields and armor with surgical precision. All ships, focus fire on their command bridge, Hannah ordered, her voice calm even as explosions rocked her ship. If we take out their leader, the rest might lose coordination. The Vorthok ship tried to swat the human vessels away with its massive guns, but they were too slow and clumsy to hit the fast-moving destroyers. Instead, the alien ship found itself being cut apart piece by piece as the humans targeted its weapons, engines, and life support systems. Meanwhile, Commander Ote was leading an even more dangerous mission. His Marines were actually boarding the enemy ships, cutting through their hulls with plasma torches and fighting the alien crews hand-to-hand in the narrow corridors inside. The Zephyrian defenders had never faced anything like this before. Their tactics were all about organized formations and careful planning. But the humans fought like creatures possessed, adapting to each new situation with frightening speed. They fight like madmen, one Zephyrian officer chittered to his commander. They show no fear of death. How do we fight an enemy that does not fear to die? The battle raged for hours, then days. The humans were outnumbered and outgunned, but they never stopped fighting. When their weapons ran out, they rammed their ships into enemy vessels. When their ships were damaged beyond repair, they used them as shields to protect the Cathara evacuation ships. Admiral Yoon Jae made the ultimate choice when he saw the largest Korath vessel preparing to fire on a group of fleeing Cathara transports. His flagship was already badly damaged, its weapons gone, and its engines failing. But it still had one thing left to give. "All hands, abandon ship," he ordered calmly. "It has been an honor serving with you all." He waited until his crew had escaped in life pods, then pointed his ship directly at the Korath dreadnought and pushed the engines to maximum power. The collision lit up space like a new star, and when the light faded, both ships were gone. For 3 days and nights, the battle continued. The humans held their line, never retreating, never giving up. And slowly, impossibly, the hegemony began to break. Their losses were mounting, their formations were scattered, and their commanders were beginning to panic. These humans fought like nothing they had ever encountered before. They seemed to care more about protecting the Cathara than they did about their own lives. When the last Cathara transport finally jumped to safety, carrying the survivors to hidden colonies in distant space, the hegemony fleet finally admitted defeat. They retreated from Cathara Prime, their pride broken and their confidence shattered. The humans had won, though the victory had cost them dearly. Many ships were lost, many brave souls had died far from home. But they had done what they came to do. They had stood as a shield between the innocent and those who would harm them. And they had held the line when no one else would. The news traveled faster than the fastest starships, spreading from world to world through hidden communication, networks and whispered conversations in dark corners of space stations. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived in fear for generations heard an impossible story. Someone had stood up to the hegemony and won. In the slave camps of the Alterian mining system, a Vorthok overseer noticed his workers talking in hushed voices during their rest period. The reptilian guard cracked his energy whip and demanded silence. but he could not silence the hope that was growing in their eyes. Word had reached even these forgotten souls in the depths of space. The humans had saved the Cathara, and the mighty hegemony had been forced to retreat. On the Council worlds, where the galaxy's most powerful civilizations made their careful political deals, emergency meetings were called in the middle of the night. Ambassador after ambassador demanded answers. How had these primitive humans dared to upset the delicate balance of power that had kept peace for so long? More importantly, what would the hegemony do in response? The humans have acted without thinking, declared the Altarian representative, his blue skin shimmering with worry. They will bring the hegemony's anger down on all of us. But others were not so sure. In private conversations, away from the formal meetings, some ambassadors whispered different thoughts. Perhaps the humans had done what they all should have done long ago. Perhaps it was time to stop being afraid. Meanwhile, in a secret laboratory, hidden in an asteroid field far from any major shipping routes, Dr. Ansu worked beside Elder Velthin and his team of Kithara. The human scientist was young but brilliant, and she had volunteered for this dangerous assignment the moment she heard about the alliance forming between their species. "Look at this," she said excitedly, pointing to the living metal growing in the biotank before them. "Your organic technology, combined with our engineering principles, is creating something entirely new." The substance in the tank pulsed with soft light, responding to her voice and movements. It was part machine and part living creature, able to repair itself when damaged and adapt to new threats. They had already used it to build prototype ships that could heal their own hull breaches and weapons that learned from each battle to become more effective. Elder Velthin watched the young human woman with amazement. Even after everything his people had suffered, she showed no fear, no hesitation about working with aliens. "Your species continues to surprise us," he said through the translation device. "Most civilizations take centuries to trust others enough for this kind of cooperation. You do it in months." Dr. Ansu smiled and touched the biotank gently. "My captain saved your people when he didn't have to. Now you're helping us build defenses we could never create alone. Trust has to start somewhere, right?" But they're peaceful. Work was interrupted by urgent news from the outer colonies. The hegemony had responded to their defeat exactly as expected, with overwhelming force and brutal anger. Massive fleets were moving toward human space, carrying enough firepower to turn entire worlds into ash. Captain Li Himan, now promoted to admiral after his heroic actions at Kithara Prime, stood in the command center of his new mobile headquarters. It was a converted mining station that could move from system to system, staying ahead of hegemony search fleets while coordinating the growing resistance. "Sir, we're receiving reports from across hegemony space," reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant Park Jin. "The Altarian mining worlds have risen in rebellion." The workers overwhelmed their Vorthok guards and seized control of 3 entire systems. Aeon nodded grimly. He had hoped this would happen, but he also knew what it meant. The hegemony will respond by sending more troops. Those brave people will need our help. "There's more, sir," Park Jin continued. "The outer Zephyrian colonies are declaring independence. Apparently, their insectoid workers decided they don't want to serve the core worlds anymore, and we're getting unconfirmed reports of uprisings on at least a dozen other worlds." This was exactly what Hyun had hoped for, but also what he had feared. The galaxy was finally waking up, finally finding the courage to resist the hegemony's tyranny. But revolutions were bloody things, and many innocent people would die before it was over. "Send what support we can to the rebellions," he ordered. "Share our tactical data and communication frequencies. But make sure they understand. We can't save everyone. They need to be ready to save themselves." The rebellion spread like fire through dry grass, on worlds that had been conquered generations ago. People remembered stories their grandparents had told about the time before the hegemony. They remembered what freedom felt like, and they wanted it back. The Zephyrian workers on the outer colonies were the most organized. They had spent years building secret communication networks and hidden weapon caches, waiting for the right moment to strike. When they heard about the humans' victory, they knew their time had come. The humans showed us it could be done, their leader transmitted to Admiral Haon during a secret communication. They proved the hegemony could be defeated. Now we will prove it too. But the most surprising rebellion came from an unexpected source. Deep in hegemony territory, on worlds that had been conquered so long ago that most galactic maps didn't even show their original names, the descendants of ancient civilizations began to stir. They had been broken and scattered for so long that everyone, including themselves, had forgotten they still existed. The story of the humans and the Cathara reached them through slave networks and underground communication channels. It reminded them of who they used to be, before the hegemony crushed their spirits and took their hope. "We were free once," an old slave whispered to his grandson in the darkness of their barracks. "Maybe we can be free again." The galaxy was changing, and there was no going back. The careful balance of power that had kept the hegemony in control for centuries was crumbling. The humans had lit a spark when they decided to save the Cathara, and now that spark was becoming a flame that threatened to burn down the old order completely. But Admiral Haon knew the hardest part was still to come. The hegemony would not give up their empire without a fight, and they had resources and weapons that the scattered rebellions could barely imagine. The real war was just beginning. Admiral Lee Haon stood at the great window of Harmony Station, watching the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. Below him, in the station's main diplomatic center, beings from across the galaxy worked side by side. A tall, blue-skinned Eltarian was showing holographic star charts to a group of former Zephyrian slaves. Nearby, human engineers worked with Cathara biospecialists to design new defensive systems. Children of a dozen different species played together in the station's garden dome, their laughter echoing through the corridors. It had been 5 years since that desperate battle at Cathara Prime, 5 years since humanity had made the choice to stand up to the hegemony when no one else would. Now, looking at what had grown from that single act of courage, Haon could hardly believe how much had changed. "You are thinking deep thoughts, my friend," said Elder Velthin, floating up beside him in his mobility suit filled with water. The old Kithara's voice came through the translation device with warmth and amusement. His people had built this station together with the humans, using bioengineering techniques that no one had thought possible before. "I'm thinking about how it all started," Hyun replied. "One distress call, one decision to do what was right, instead of what was safe. And now look where we are." Velthin's large, dark eyes sparkled with something that might have been laughter. "The other galactic powers used to call your people barbarians. They said humans were too wild, too unpredictable, to be trusted with advanced technology. They were right, in a strange way. Barbarians do not follow the careful rules that keep civilizations afraid to act." The Free World's compact had grown far beyond anything anyone had imagined. What started as humans and Cathara working together had become a true alliance of dozens of species. Former slaves had become leaders. Conquered worlds had become free. The hegemony, which had once ruled nearly half the galaxy with an iron fist, now controlled barely a quarter of their old territory. Captain Park Nari approached them, carrying the daily intelligence reports. She had been promoted to command the station's defenses, and her face showed the confidence of someone who had proven herself in battle many times over. "Admiral, we have good news from the Epsilon sector. The Korath Third Fleet has withdrawn completely. The local species are asking for compact protection and want to join the alliance." Hyun nodded, still watching the scene below. In the garden dome, he could see his own nephew playing with a young Kithara child, both of them laughing as they chased floating bioluminescent toys through the artificial reef. "Grant their request, and send a message to Earth Command," We'll need more ships and personnel out here. The Alliance is growing faster than we can keep up with. It was a good problem to have, but still a problem. Every day, more worlds asked to join the compact. Every day, more species threw off the chains of hegemony, rule, and declared their independence. But protecting all these new allies required resources that the Alliance was still struggling to provide. The hegemony is not finished yet, Park Nari warned. Our intelligence reports suggest they're gathering their remaining fleets for one massive counterattack. They know that if they don't act soon, they'll lose everything. Heian had been expecting this. Desperate enemies often became the most dangerous ones. The hegemony leaders knew their empire was crumbling, and they would probably try one last terrible assault to destroy the free world's compact before it could grow any stronger. Let them come, he said quietly. We're not the same people who answered that first distress call 5 years ago. We're stronger now, and we're not alone. That was the real difference, and everyone in the galaxy could see it. The hegemony fought to conquer, to take what others had built. The compact fought to protect, to defend those who could not defend themselves. And when people fight for their families, their homes, and their freedom, they fight harder than any army of conquest ever could. Through the great window, Heian could see ships from across the Alliance arriving and departing. Human cruisers worked alongside Cathera bioships. Former Vorthok slaves flew vessels they had captured from their old masters. Zephyrian rebels used their natural flying skills to pilot fighter craft in ways that amazed everyone who saw them. Your people changed the galaxy, Velthan said softly. Not through conquest or threats, but by showing others that it was possible to stand up to bullies. You gave the galaxy back its courage. As the twin stars of the system began to set beyond the station's viewports, their golden light filled the diplomatic center below. Heian watched as representatives from worlds that had been enemies for centuries sat down together to plan joint defense strategies. He saw former slaves working as equals with beings whose species had once ruled over them. He saw children playing together without caring about the old prejudices and fears that had divided their parents. This was what they had fought for. Not territory or resources, but the simple idea that all beings deserved to live free from fear. The idea that when someone cried out for help, others should answer that call. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly how it should be. The old order of fear and oppression was dying, replaced by something new and hopeful. There would still be battles to fight, still be enemies to face. But now, when the darkness gathered, the free peoples of the galaxy knew they would not face it alone. They had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest strength was not in conquest or careful politics, but in the simple willingness to stand as a shield for those who needed protection. And as long as that spirit lived, freedom would never truly die.